Hi, this is Ming, the injury guru. I'm a physical therapist here in New York City, and I'm the author of the book, The Permanent Pain Cure. And I primarily specialize in sports injuries, occupational injuries, and I primarily do soft tissue work or myofascial work. Today, I want to talk about a pretty serious problem that's happening in professional sports, namely Kevin Durant. As you know, Kevin Durant's probably the best or the second best player in the NBA. I believe him and Kawhi Leonard are the two best players in the NBA right now. And he just suffered a very serious Achilles tendon rupture 2 nights ago after only playing for about 12 minutes, coming back from a calf pull that happened approximately 4 weeks ago. And the question remains, how did this happen? Why did it happen? Could it have been avoided? I know from reading a whole bunch of articles on the internet and in newspapers that he was icing his calf, his original injury that he had a month ago, pretty extensively. And if you look at some of my past videos, I'm very much against using ice on soft tissue injuries or any type of injuries really, because I believe it impairs the natural healing process. And the healing process being, there's a natural inflammatory response that occurs, which is a release of histamines, which increases what we call cell wall permeability, meaning things coming in and out of the cell when you have this histamine release. And that's done for a very specific reason, because the waste products needs to move out and the new stuff needs to be brought in so the healing can occur. If you want to be specific about it, once the cell wall permeability occurs, there's a migration of leukocytes, which are white blood cells, which includes cells like phagocytes and macrophages, which are these little cells that act like Pac-Man. They go into the area and they eat up all the dead tissue and they bring it back out. And that's why the swelling is there. It's a favorable thing. It's a desirable thing. And after that occurs, the body signals in its miraculous ways. Remember, this system has been perfected over hundreds of thousands of years as Homo sapiens have been in existence, to start sending healing hormones into that area for repair, specifically IGF-1 and IGF-2, which comes from the liver, which is a polypeptide hormone, which is basically a fancy way of saying an amino acid based hormone that goes to the area of the injury. In the case, let's say Kevin Durant's at the first injury, which was in his calf, which tells the body, let's repair. And that takes time. And the inflammatory response that occurs at that time is, like I said before, it's actually desirable. So what happens now if you put ice packs on that calf or that Achilles, which Kevin Durant did, because that's what the people in the NBA basically do as their go-to treatment? I personally don't agree with that approach. I've not used ice for over 23 years in my practice, because based on my research, my experience, ice is not a good thing because of these reasons I just mentioned. So now, if you put the ice on this area, not only does it stop the migration of the leukocytes, the macrophages, the phagocytes, and the initiation of the release of histamines, it also congeals the tissue and constricts the tissue and makes it very, very tight, which further creates more adhesions. And the adhesions basically causes a gluing effect of all the structures in and around the area, which is normally a naturally occurring process, but it seems to be exacerbated by the cooling or the icing of, say, the calf or the Achilles. What would happen then instead, the gastrocnemius muscle and the soleus muscle and the Achilles tendon have a certain amount of elasticity, meaning it can stretch. But it also has to have a sliding and a gliding effect with respect to one another, and that gets compromised. So now let's say that the calf was iced, and then he comes back 4 weeks later, and then he tears his Achilles, which is a much more serious problem than a pulled calf. Kevin Durant probably now is looking towards a minimum of 6 months, if not 12 months of rehabilitation. And I think he's in his contract year, So this really bodes very seriously for Kevin Durant, and I think this should be a wake-up call for the ball players. I would have approached this slightly differently. In fact, very differently. I would not have used any ice whatsoever. I would have used Chinese herbs. Chinese herbs actually facilitates all the positive natural healing reactions. If you look at traditional Chinese medicine, or if you look at Ayurvedic medicine, these medicine techniques have been around for 4,000 years, and none of these techniques from Ayurvedic medicine or Chinese medicine uses ice. In fact, they tell you very much not to use ice because they also feel that it impairs the natural healing process. From my trial and error for the past 2.5 decades doing soft tissue work, I very much agree with traditional Chinese medicine, and that heat is actually the favorable way to treat a problem like a pulled calf or an Achilles. But what I would have done was I would have used a Chinese herbal poultice for the first few days just to manage the swelling a little bit, but it doesn't impair the healing process. Then afterwards, do some lymphatic drainage massage and create a blood flow where the area can heal better. After the initial swelling is subsided a little bit, I would implement heat, not ice, because the heat will actually facilitate the natural healing processes. So the problem here is now Kevin Durant started out with a relatively smaller injury. A pulled calf is not a small injury. You can be out for a few weeks. He was out for 4 weeks. Now that morphed into a torn or ruptured Achilles tendon, which is now up to a 12-month process. So if anyone out there knows Kevin Durant or his people, perhaps you should have them look at this video and look at different ways of possibly treating soft tissue and tendon injuries instead of just reflexively just using ice. Like I said, I have not used ice for over 2.5 decades because I just don't think it works. I think doing it the other way makes more sense. And I have the backing of people in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine. They've been doing it for 4,000 years. So this is Ming Chu. I just wanted to share that with you, that if you get an injury, please rethink using ice. Try it the other way and let's see what happens. And I've had experience with ice myself, and I hurt my shoulder years ago and I used ice, and it led to my shoulder being actually more restricted and more frozen by putting the ice pack on. So signing off, this is Ming Chu, the Injury Guru. I hope this video added some value to your health. And the next time you have an injury, please reconsider not using ice. Typically, they say rest, ice, compression, and elevation. I mean, that is something that they do in professional sports. And I think it should be rethought because the information out there clearly shows that by icing an area down can be very deleterious. With that said, take care, and I hope you guys stay healthy, keep your fascia nice and supple, and you will be injury-free. And you take care and have a good day. And there's a couple more games left in the finals, and I will definitely be there to watch it. Take care.